So by way of introduction, my name is Andrew Kuziemko. I lead the Data and Analytics team at the MTA. This talk is really aimed at, well, anybody who'd be interested, of course, but the audience I had in mind is folks who are working at a public sector agency who have struggles working with data, especially complex data or big data, which is definitely the boat that myself and my team a few years ago were in. And now we're doing much better. You're placing Nat's talk on congestion pricing this morning. That is the kind of thing the MTA would not have been able to do not that long ago, right? And so it's like we have a modest success story that we'd like to share with you. And for those who are interested in like trying to do this at their own agency, we would definitely be interested in talking to you afterwards or take your questions now. But yeah, this panel is our folks from the DNA team. We'd like as well all introduce ourselves as well as Hannah shortly. Yeah, I guess I'll just get right into it. Or
Go ahead.
Okay, so this is what we want to do when we do analytics. This is super high level, right? I have no charts or line charts in this presentation. There'll be no actual data from the data and analytics team. So when you're doing analytics, you go through these steps in some way, right? You have to, if the guy on the far right is, let's say, the chairman of your company, the commissioner of your agency, your whatever it is, a manager who needs better data to manage their workforce, they usually ask you as an analyst. We're definitely taking this talk from the analyst perspective for some insights, a question they want an answer to. Maybe it's just bullet points for a speech they have to give, whatever it is. You go looking for the data that you know your company must have because you know your company. And what you have in mind is the chart that you're going to create for your boss or whoever this is. But to do that, what you need to do is you need to first extract the data. You typically need to clean it because the data was meant for an operational purpose 9 times out of 10, not for your analysis. You need to like kind of do the math that you're good at as an analyst to like transform that data into something more useful, which I'm calling here information. And then you get to do the part that you probably had in mind when you started, which is like, I'm going to make this killer bar chart or line chart or whatever it is. Some neat visual that you're going to do, and then you're going to share it somehow with your boss or whoever asked for it. And so you're probably having those last 2 steps in mind when you do this. But then the reality of it is that the first couple steps take up all your time, or they never succeed, and you're 3 weeks behind and never got anything. So I've worked at the MTA for over 10 years. I'd say the first 6 years was managing a team that was trying to do. Okay, if anybody would like to sit down, there are seats in the front. Yeah. So anyway, the idea of like working with data, we have a lot of talented people who know how to do the last few steps of this process. But the first few steps always get us in trouble. And so that was the situation we were in, where we were just sort of constantly, I felt, as an analyst at the MTA, both for the team I used to manage and more broadly, kind of constantly underperforming in terms of like, what was possible versus what we were able to deliver. So this is more like what we were actually doing at the MTA before the data analytics team stood up. There were data sources, and we had Power BI, and we had a need to deliver insights. And so we basically used Power BI to just do everything. We used Power BI to extract the data from a database, to clean it, to transform it, to make the visual, and then we would send the Power BI to someone or like screenshot it to make a PowerPoint or something. That was better than working in Excel, I guess, but not a lot better. And sometimes we didn't even have access to the data sources. What we had was access to a guy. If your pipeline involves a guy, you're not off to a good start on your project, right? So that guy's gonna ask, why do you need this? What's it for? Do you have permission to access this? Maybe if you're nice enough, the guy will send you an email with an extract of your data with a view that he wrote based on his understanding of your business problem. But he's pretty far from the manager who's asking for it, doesn't understand your problem very well. There's really nothing good about this process. And yet there's lots of things at the MTA that used to work this way, and quite a few that still do that we haven't gotten to yet. But this is not good. This is what we want to get away from. But for years, this is what we had. So like a few obvious problems with this, perhaps. It was hard to find that guy. There's no catalog, there's no inventory. You had to kind of know who to ask, and you have several emails and meetings just to find out what data the MTA has on a certain problem and like where you would go to get access to it. There's no clear process for gaining access once you find the guy. There's no way I can say, I'm working on this project, I deserve this data, you need to give it to me. It's urgent or important, or you could very easily say no, and there's no repercussions for that. We're just not understand, not have time to work on something else. there was no data sharing across groups. If there was, it was all informal. And so if I finally overcame this block and got the data I needed, or at least good enough, 6 months later, someone else from a different team needs it too, they're just gonna start all over again because there's no way to know that I had it. There's no communication on that. There's nothing centralized. And there's no sharing of logic or useful transformations. As we've been working through the company and finding more and more old pipelines that we've come across, there's some really good stuff. Like people have written like really complex and detailed SQL queries or Python scripts that run manually in a notebook. And there's some really intelligent stuff that's been done, but you wouldn't know unless you knew that person, that corner of the company. It's a huge company, 70,000 employees, however many office staff. You're not going to know everybody in every area to know that all the smart work they've already done. And then Power BI is just a really bad tool for a pipeline. It's not a pipeline tool, but you can use it like that. You can kind of abuse it to do whatever you want. And so if there was like some kind of join or interesting piece of the Power BI that's like helps make the visual, but it's inside the Power BI, and if all you really need is that intermediate piece, it's too bad. It's in the Power BI. You're not going to get that. And we had situations a few years ago before we started the DNA team. Where people were saying, what I really want is this table from your Power BI. So I don't really use it for the visual. I download data out of the line chart, and that's my data source for another Power BI. That's not a good data flow, right? When you're downloading data out of someone else's Power BI, that's kind of like analytical rock bottom, right? And sometimes you have to hit rock bottom before you know you need help, and that's kind of where we're at. And we kind of realized we needed to do better. So how do we do better, right? And to be honest, we didn't immediately move to doing better, to doing this the right way. What we first did was Microsoft Synapse, which I'm not sure if folks have experience with. That is an okay tool, but it wasn't really what we needed. It wasn't a very good pipeline tool. I think it has its place, but it's not for kind of high volume data orchestration. So again, to the kind of ideal pipeline with all the same steps, I think the first thing you want to do that we did is start to understand like some kind of roles and responsibilities here, like who should be doing what in an analytics function in a big company. And so kind of dividing up the space a little bit to think of the far left, these data sources, that's definitely like IT land, right? Also external vendors, like MTA, like any agency has huge data sources that are being maintained by vendors. We have also stuff in our buses and subways and our yards, maintenance databases, ridership data with various vendors. We have lots of stuff. Our IT department develops apps that create data. They have legacy databases that are very old, right, that we're trying to replace. So IT and vendors have a huge role to play in all this, but it's very far upstream, right, as far as the left of this process. And again, the perspective of this group and kind of who hopefully I'm talking to is mostly folks on the far right, the people who want to do analytics, right, who want to like create visuals, do interesting things with data, answer questions, combine data in new ways, try modeling, right, like get those interesting answers for the managers or whoever at your company, for the public, hopefully, from the data. And it's these middle steps, maybe these like slightly like unsexy steps that are like really overlooked that I wanted my team to fix, at least for the MTA, right? And to do that, as Matt mentioned before, we have something we call the MTA Data Lake that we stood up, probably 3 years old now. Originally it came with Synapse, but we have since rescued it, and now it's working differently. But it does those middle 3 steps, right? And we orchestrate all this, not through Synapse anymore, but through Apache Airflow. We have a really good data engineering team. So we can talk more about that later if folks have questions. That's kind of like the secret that actually makes this work, right? That gives the data scientists on the team the ability to do all these interesting things. And so we do the middle step here, right? When somebody says, I have an else I want to do, someone on the far right wants to make a dashboard or work on something for, the managers in their company and they're part of the company. They'll say like, the data sources here, help me find the data source. We ingest the data they need. We organize and clean up. We work with them and other experts in the business to capture their transformations intelligently, make sure we have the tables they need, and we make sure that runs every single day so that their dashboard will just work. They can access through SQL, they can do Tableau or Power BI, or we have a tool called Mode Analytics, which is really good. But whatever the BI tool is, it doesn't really matter. The data lake looks like a SQL endpoint to all these things, and it just works. And so the advantage is sort of like, well, you have to work in a shared environment. And so it's kind of promoting a sharing culture here because your data is going to be on there with everybody else's, as long as it's not sensitive. But once it's there, you can forget about this hassle. You don't need to worry about the guy who sends you the data. Like all that will be 1,000 times better. That's kind of like our promise. And then of course they can work with their tools. And so that's like, we're kind of like the middle part of this flow. One last thing to mention is this data catalog. I mentioned like before, in the before times, it was not easy to even know what data the MTA had. We're hoping to build, this is a thing for later this year, hopefully like an MTA-wide data inventory. We're not there yet. What we do have is a data inventory through this open source tool called the Munson of everything on the data lake. And so I can't demo it from here because we're not on the MTA network, but if you were, you can go to, it looks a little bit like Google. We try to make it look like Google. It's like a white page with a text box. And you type in subway ridership or bus maintenance or whatever it is, and it will bring up all the data sets we have that are tagged that way. You can start looking through, and then it has all the metadata, table names, the column descriptions. Assuming that has been documented properly, which is something that we are always trying to catch up on. That's the idea, is to like really facilitate analytics at the MTA. And in truth, as you saw on the mass congestion pricing presentation, a lot of our staff are also on the far right side of this. They are also data scientists, analysts, trying to come up with answers for things. We're not just facilitating analytics outside our group, we are also in the mix, which means that we're kind of like dog fooding all the time, right? Like we are, if it doesn't work for us, it's not gonna work for others. If the query performance is slow for us, it's gonna be slow for others. So we're always making sure that our data scientists and engineers are working very closely together so the overall experience is good. But it's that middle step that I think MTA really needed that we provided. I know this conference is interested in open data, and so just to point out, all the open data that you're seeing from the MTA is also flowing through this process. And the way we QC open data is the same way we QC everything else. We're using the same data sets internally every day to look at metrics, to understand, make sure our performance, our internal operations are good. So some version of that same data that just goes out the door to open data. So our team took over excuse me, responsibility for the MTA's open data program 3 years ago. If you recall, maybe you recall 4 years ago, they passed MTA open data law, which required us to be more transparent. They don't name a law after you if you're doing it really well. So that's never a good sign. And in truth, we weren't doing it very well. Our data, Rachel can probably speak to this, it wasn't the most transparent place. When we took over the responsibility for uploading everything. And it became clear why we weren't very good. I don't think it was necessarily that we didn't want to be more transparent. Maybe there was some of that. You really can't be more transparent if you don't have a good handle on your data internally. And so the process was to like ask someone in Long Island Railroad, or ask someone in bridges and tunnels or subways, send me some Excel once a month, and then somebody was copying and pasting those cells and pasting them into the New York State Open Data Portal. You're never going to get very much of value if that's your process. But if you can't do any better, you can't really ask them to do more. And so now that we have this, folks like the ones in this room can ask us to do more. We are trying to do as fast as we can, but if there's areas that we're missing, we are now like open for business, right? The MTA can find other data sources, organize them this way, use them internally to get better, but then also share with the public more data. So now we are in a position to be more transparent like we weren't before. Okay, second last slide. Just a few things that like I've learned along the way. From the folks on the team and just from experience. Some of these were obvious at the beginning and some of them kind of learned as we went. Culture of data sharing, we didn't really have one at the MTA. Some people wanted to work well together, some people didn't. Just centralizing data, just saying your data will be here and others can use it is a little bit of like a nervous moment for folks at first, but that also means they can get everybody else's that participates. And so you end up having like a kind of virtuous circle after a while. People realizing like, I shared my data from my department, nothing bad happened, I have access to everything else too. This is actually just way better. And so you can start to build a positive culture where we had a pretty negative one not that long ago. Automate as much as possible. Obviously, nobody likes having the intern come in at 5 a.m. to run the Python script. There's that aspect of automation that improves things. Not wasting your time manipulating things in Excel. But it also is a form of documentation. Like if there's a process today that's just in somebody's head and they do it every day, that's not documented. That guy leaves, he's gonna have to teach someone before he goes. Undocumented code is still bad, but at least code itself is like some kind of codification of what your process is. And it makes you a lot more serious about what your process is, right? You can't BS it if it's in code. You can't say like, well, I just changed the numbers to make them look right at the end. No, it's either in there or not. If it's wrong, it's a bug, you gotta fix it. Clear data governance. This is something that exists for the MTA data lake. The MTA does not have yet, and we're something to work on a company-wide data governance policy. This is something we need. But if you're implementing the system we have, you have to have rules about how data moves from one part of the data lake to another and who can access it, from where and what access they need. We have put everything as service now tickets for getting access. Data, we've announced data zone owners, like legal, head of legal is going to own this zone. So they get service now tickets. They read the justification and approve or reject. There's like an auditable list now of like who has access to what kind of data MTA on the data lake and why they're given access. So if someone ever does something inappropriate, you can go back and be like, well, you approved them for this reason. And so we can start to implement these kind of things, whereas we can't if it's just sort of the Wild West and nobody's kind of paying attention. Everyone has their guy. That guy is not going to do data governance, for his one database. Really want to centralize the first 3 steps, both on the data lake and honestly with a team. Like we have taken it on as our mission to be good at this, as opposed to like it's a thing we do in addition to whatever else we do. I think if analytics is important, then it's important to do well, to make it somebody's job to get it right. And honestly, when like a pipeline goes down, somebody has to fix it. If there's a bug in it, we're going to correct it. Versus it's kind of like nobody's job to make sure this works, and we just hope for the best is what we were doing before. This is something that kind of like I came to late, but I think the rest of the team saw it sooner. I used to think our product was going to be dashboards and charts, like we were going to create charts, and we create lots of charts. So don't get me wrong, but I thought that was going to be our main output. It's pretty clear now. Our main output should be the step right before that. It should be like the information. Are we creating really good tables on the data lake that like then anybody in the company can use? It's actually not that hard to make a good chart if the data is good. It's really hard if you don't. But our team doesn't need to make every chart at the MTA, and of course we don't. And so more and more we're trying to design projects where someone's like, can I get a dashboard on bus speeds? It's like, how about we give you a table that refreshes every morning, and your guy makes a dashboard. And it's actually going to be better for them in the long run, because then they can like nuance it rather than kind of come back to us and be like, can you add an extra filter with this and that? Be like, well, you already made it. Your guy can do that. It'll be a lot more responsive if you have it yourself. Oh yeah, if you see on the document, this is like an ongoing battle. It's hard to fill in every blank, but it's really important to document stuff. We want this data to be used, and so if it's well explained on the data catalog, it's more likely to be used than if it's not. I get a lot of questions about like where our team falls in the MTA. So we are 2 down from the CEO, Jenna Lieber. We are not in IT. We work a lot with IT, and honestly, this function that we were doing would have been sort of with IT before, although I'm not sure they saw it as the job exactly. But we've kind of taken that over. So, and within the team, we have like 3 pieces. Data science and open data are pretty close in terms of like the work style. But a big distinction between data engineering and data science. So you really need someone, I realize I'm going too long. You do need a data engineering team they're not trained bus nerds. They don't actually really care what the project's about. They just want to make sure everything works and the platform works. And that's really important. Before this, I didn't have that. And everybody thought like the pipeline stuff is something they had to do, but they really just want to get to the answers so they could see the analytical result. So we have a data engineering manager who helped build all this stuff. And he has a team of like platform engineers who like do the ingest, and that has been a godsend. So the rest of the team, the other like 2/3, 3/4 of the team can just be doing data science. And then open data, of course, is a lot of why we're all here. As I mentioned, that kind of flows through the pipeline the same way. It just goes out the door instead of staying inside the MTA. And that is it. So I think we're going to do intros.
Great. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Andy, for that presentation. My name is Hannah Spierer. I am moderating, facilitating this panel. I am a senior manager for policy with MTA's policy and external relations team. I do a lot of communications and policy implementation for the MTA's most high-profile projects going on. But I'm lucky that in my work I get to work really closely with the data team here to make sure that their work is amplified and that everyone here knows all the good work that we're doing. So I'm excited to talk with this team and join them so that they can, in their own words, tell you all the good stuff that they do. So everyone's going to go down and introduce themselves, and then we'll get into the meat of the discussion.
Myself and team are also very happy to work with Hannah every day. I should do myself today. My title is the Deputy Chief of Data Analytics at 50 years for 10 years, and I would like train buses.
Hi, my name is Lisa. I ended MTA program in My favorite open data set is our operating mode data set.
Hey, I'm Ben. I am a senior data scientist. I've been BATA for like 360 days. Yes, and I started April before the lecture, so I was a little there. A lot of what I do it's always on like assets, how we fix up, which is why I was able to start off a bunch of questions to people to ask.
Hi everyone, I'm Agarwal. I have been working at Azure for almost 2 years. I started as a data engineer, so I used to work as the senior data engineer on the Invest. I had mentioned recently started in contract management role.
Afternoon, everybody. My name is Gayan. I am another one of the senior data scientists on our team. My favorite open data set is the bus speeds data set, specifically because I think it's a really good microcosm of a lot of the South ideas are in New York City.
Thank you. So Lisa and I took my first lightning round question. So I'm going to make you guys pick another answer just to start everyone off and warm everything up. I want to know, what is everyone's favorite MTA data set, either published on the Open Data Portal or just the favorite data set that you've worked with at your time at the MTA?
I like the subway word unit station data set. A lot of work goes into making that and like also see the look modeling, so such way of research.
My second favorite data set, I'm sorry, one, is our data set on major felonies. This is a hot topic at the MTA, and having the information public has saved me from so many emails from press office.
My actual favorite is the Orgy Best Station. The hourly stuff, which then I listened to the simulation talk in the auditorium, was really cool because they used the proxy for pedestrian traffic during the day. My cheeky answer is there's a lot of information about snowmobiles on the Open Data Portal, like where you can buy them, where you can register them, what the common colors are. So,
True. My favorite data set is the Hourly. He's always in bus ridership data. The key presentations, and they currently at the last session that use of that data. So very cool use of those data sets on B.
My secondary data set is the bus fare vision data set, which I think interesting because it's a very small data set. It's just once per quarter of fare vision is on our buses. And I think it's really interesting. It's a very small number, but it comes from a huge pipeline analytics that we do. We need to think about who's running our buses, who's paying, what ACEs, and then the average ACEs who's we total weights of the bio that person's already as best as we can, given all your reflections in that I1.
Sorry. I'll answer this one too, because I'm also a regular user of MTA Open Data, and that is the Easy Pass retailer locations, which I saw that one and I was like, why do we have that? And then I started working on congestion pricing and used it almost every day. So it saved my life. Thank you guys for that. I am going to kick this one to the three folks on the end of the panel. I want you to tell everyone what good data science, good data engineering looks like at a place like the MTA. What are some best practices that you guys have developed, and how do we memorialize that information at the MTA?
I think part of what makes a good data science project, Andy sort of stole the thunder for this, but is sort of something that's reusable. Like one of the things I work with is, if you've ever taken the subway, there's those like little posters that are like, hey, track maintenance on the weekends, no service. So that those are called general orders. And there's a system that we use for tracking those in the last source hub. And we put it on the data lake. And then it was then used by other people unbeknownst to us. And then they asked us questions. They're like, oh, it's so great because now I can like look at all these data sets together that like before I had to talk to different people for. And so like the best sort of project is one where we get to help the person or the group that needs to do something. We also sort of surreptitiously get to then make that available and then like be useful for other people. Obviously also code review is great too.
I will talk a little bit about the data engineering practices. So I think Andy described really well what engineering or maybe not and the absence of good data engineering looked like at the NTA before I even started doing it. I think the focus with the engineering team initially was really building something that was easy to maintain and reliable before we can start thinking about scale. So when we were focused on kind of building something that was maintainable, we want to make sure our developers, we were able to give effective and easy developer controls. So making it possible for developers to test their code locally, for instance. That's something that we started in a small pieces of it, and we're fully rolling it out now. The second thing, reliability, right? So making sure that we weren't relying anymore on any manual processes, automating everything through Airflow allowed us to deliver data to end systems in a timely, consistent, and transparent way. And also, Andy mentioned failure, like fixing failures when they happen, right? Allowing for failure notifications so that we were able to go fix bugs when they catch them and fix them quickly. And doing all of that through one single pane of glass with Airflow made it all possible. So once we were able to build something that was maintainable, not just through us, but through the developers at the MTA, and reliable, we were able to start scaling this product and platform. And we've really been focusing on that in the last 6 to 8 and 9 months by going to Kubernetes on the cloud. Yeah.
I think there's a joke I like to use on our team a lot, which is a lot of people think that the hardest problem in data science is like generalized intelligence. I think the hardest question in data science is actually, why don't these two numbers match? Because working at somewhere like the MTA, where like the press are always paying attention to our work, customers are obviously interested in our work, numbers like our bus fare evasion, or for those who see the presentation earlier, how many entries are coming into the CBD. It's really important that we can all agree and tell a consistent story that everybody believes. And what's really key to that is something that Andy mentioned, documentation. We need to make sure that all of the decisions we make in our code are easily understood by anybody reading both that code, but also anybody who doesn't read that code. We want to make sure that we have a wiki, and beyond that, presentations like this one, but also stuff internally that make sure that any of our processes are easily understood and we're necessarily easily challenged by folks with that experience. I mean, people here had worked there for 30 years, sometimes 40 years, and we want to make sure that their expertise is also incorporated into any of the numbers that you guys see and play with.
Can I add one more thing?
Yeah,
I think with all of this stuff with data science and engineering, I think a big focus has also been reproducibility. So being able to make it as easy as possible to reproduce code and reproduce, even if it's transformations, right? So whether it's ingesting raw data, transforming existing data, how easy can we make it for people to do that so that we're not kind of repeating work? I think that was a big focus with the way that we set up data engineering on the team.
Right, thank you. Andy, this is really a question for you, but I open it up to everyone on the panel. So as you mentioned just a few years ago, this centralized data team didn't really exist, and now it's existing, full steam ahead. So how did you demonstrate the value of the centralized data team to leadership?
I think by demonstrating the value of a centralized data team leadership. So you don't have to do everything all at once, right? So I think one advantage we had was a team that I kind of inherited before doing DNA already had some rudimentary pipelines. They had the kind of bad homegrown version of pipelines going, but it was for really critical metrics. It was for fare evasion, for subway and bus performance, all the on-time performance, weight assessment, service delivered. Customer metrics that you guys may have heard of, those are all coming from this team that I inherited. And so we already had a little bit of juice, a little bit of I said, hey, the person who makes this go just quit, and it's gonna be hard to maintain this. You need to give me a little bit of room, kind of talking to our head of IT. So I think that's when we got Synapse and we got a little bit of freedom, not a lot, but we started to demonstrate that like there's a better way of doing this, and then kind of did the next one, the next one, the next one, and before you know, people kind of cottoned on to like this is just a good idea generally. Trust me, I have PowerPoints from 4 years ago where I was trying to sell this idea. The intention from day one, at least in my mind, was always to do this generally across the MTA, but you have to start with something that like people understand and can see before you say like, I'd like to do analytics for the entire company, like now, like that's not gonna work. So you have to kind of prove that you know what you're talking about. Anything else, Laura? Kevin? Well, starting analytics students. You're all there.
Right, great. I'm gonna move on to everyone in the panel, but Ben and Gayan, I know you might have some unique insight for this one. And this is a fun question. What is something interesting about the MTA that you've learned since working there that the audience might be surprised to know?
Start.
So I'm going to go back to buses as I have been for the last few questions. I think a lot of people, when they ride a bus, they're used to kind of thinking of it as, a route and a direction. I mean, I get on the B44 SBS, I take it to Court Square, for example. But that's Court Square to the Redford Lafayette, which I took to Court Square. That's my commute today. But the buses are a lot more complicated than that. There's a lot of what we call shapes that are little variations of the route. And I think it's really interesting, both from the actual existence of this data, but also because that reflects that the MTA is aware of all these little kinds of variations that the route might have to do, whether that's to attend a school, whether that's to avoid some very long-term construction. All of these are things that the MTA is both aware of and takes into account. And I think that is a good metaphor for a lot of the data sets at the MTA where from the customer's perspective, it's like this very easy to grok, easily to swipe in at a station, get on board, and get out somewhere else. But in practice, in terms of what either the data or real experts at the MTA know, it's a world of complexity on that.
I'm gonna give a few short ones. I will say that I really like my job, not just because my boss's boss is here, but also I feel like I learn really interesting stuff that's surprising every day. So a few fun ones besides the ones that I've at the beginning. Every piece of track in the network is walked by someone twice a week, at least, which I think is kind of nuts. Part of that's because we don't run as much service overnight, so you can do that. The interesting thing about that is that, as everyone knows, the subway runs 24/7. Most subway systems in the world do not do that. Because the New York City subway system runs 24/7, there is not enough yard space to park all the trains. You simply can't store them everywhere. So you have to keep running trains, which is why during COVID, there were ghost trains. You can't park them anywhere. You have to run some, which I think is nuts. And then maybe the last one, for anyone who's taken a circuits class, whenever you were in college or whatever, the way that track blocks work with the signals is E&M 101. It could not be simpler, and it's a really elegant solution from the 1910s of how do you make sure trains don't run into one another. It's fail safe, it's just hardware, there's a small little, the rails are right there, they're wires, it's a circuit, and the train makes the connections. So there's a lot of really fun stuff I think like that, where sort of like Gayan said, you take it for granted, but you're oh my God, this is this incredible complex network that has to work always. So there's a lot of just fun stuff.
Yeah, I think for me, in the role of managing open data, I kind of, maybe more so than other people in the team, get the opportunity to work with other transit agencies across the country and just have conversations with people about the data that they're sharing as well. Something I did not appreciate until working at the MTA and being in this role is the scope of our system and just how incredibly large it is. It's really interesting to talk to folks who work at MARTA in Atlanta or DART in Dallas, and their biggest problems are usually retaining riders and attracting new ones. The MTA doesn't really have that problem, and our biggest problem is probably the state of the repair of our system because it is so old and huge. And it's just really interesting, I think, to be working at a company in a country where the scale of the problems that we face are so different than so many other transit agencies. And underappreciated the work that people in like our capital team have to do to keep the system running.
I think Ben took like two of my favorite facts, so I had to come up with something on the fly. But one thing I think has been interesting is like by putting out so much more data on open data in the last couple of years, we've had a lot of like really positive like pats on the back from the press and advocate groups and stuff. To be honest, the numbers in those years haven't gotten better necessarily. Like it still remains really hard to run a railroad, but like it's just been a kind of like a win for the MTA to just be more transparent, to be more honest about the challenges we have, and kind of put out more granular data, even if the performance hasn't really changed. It remains challenging.
Should do one. Yeah.
I think one interesting thing that I've learned is that I guess the most basic, maybe obvious thing is an appreciation for how difficult it is to run a transit system this big for this many people. And I think learning about all of the things that need to go right before my train arrives at my stop on schedule, I think is just kind of has been amazing. And underneath all of that is, again, when we start thinking about data, there's so much data at every moment that is being produced and generated. And for the steps involved in getting that data from a hardware, a sensor, or a swipe to where it can be useful and usable internally, and then shareable and transparent for the public is just going through that process with so many data sources has been just fascinating. And it sounds like the more we work with teams across departments and agencies across the MTA, the more new data and like new kind of data systems and vendors we begin to interact with, and it's just like the scope of the work kind of continues to grow, right? Because as time moves on, we are updating our systems and we change vendors when the time comes, right? We overhaul our assets and so on, and we have to be the like exercise of making that upgrade is so complex, because you don't just take away something that already exists, but you have to kind of be really careful in that replacement. It's almost like a slow change of hands, and we still want to keep our systems up. We still want to make sure service is being delivered on time, our customers are happy, and that we're still kind of using the latest and greatest technology and still getting data next day for our riders. So I think it's been fascinating to like go through that journey with existing data, and I think the more we continue to work with teams, more new teams, I think the scope of that will continue to grow.
Thank you. So I want to know from all of you, what's a challenge that either individually or as a team you've had to overcome that's unique to working with data, either at the MTA or just like in the public sector as well?
I think this is reiterating something I said earlier, that working at the MTA, you end up working with people who have been at the MTA for 30 years, 40 years, who are like really experts in their field. And I think that that's something unique, especially somebody who previously worked in the tech industry, where people have 2 to 3 gigs. One of the reasons I chose to work at the MTA is for a bit more of that expertise or that sense of camaraderie that comes with working with somebody among the team. But it also means that oftentimes when you are pushing change in the processes, you do need to make sure that you really do due diligence to explain, like, here's what's potentially changing, here's what's going to be different about the numbers you're going to be seeing in this dashboard, in these metrics, and making sure that you get buy-in from everyone is really important. It is, you don't want to be the one coming in as like data scientist telling you, oh, I know how to do your job better than you. You definitely do not. What you're doing is you're offering your own expertise in potentially how they're going to do their job.
Yeah, I'll kind of add to that. I think similarly, like, that this data challenge, especially in this new role as, I talk to more people who are maybe not so happy to share their data, not so happy to kind of give me the key to their door. I think it's been, maybe I'll talk a little bit about the data catalog we built, because that almost serves as this soft tool that has helped maybe socialize the idea of sharing data and making it maybe a little bit more appetizing among teams outside of ours at the MTA. It's basically this tool that Andy mentioned early on at the Lahalava months, and the goal with that was really to build a shared data catalog to allow for data searchability and discovery within the organization. And I hope it has made it easier for people to find data that we already have, that already exists. So they're not kind of calling their guy and asking for an Excel extract so they can build their Power BI anymore, but just go use it in our 808. And I think another kind of our hope is that people will use it as this kind of real source of truth for our metrics and how we look at our performance and how we evaluate ourselves and hold ourselves accountable internally by sharing data among other departments first. And it's almost like a replica of what we're trying to do in a way with open data, but internal to the MTA. So yeah, that's been one exciting and interesting tool that I worked on with the engineering team. It was, I think, a really interesting exercise. Just even the technical aspect of building the data catalog was really fun, and I think it has brought about some change in company culture and how we think about data sharing and transparency within the organization.
I'm carrying that's sort of off of that. Someone messaged me on Thursday, or me at one of the coworkers. It was like, "Hey, I found this table in the data lake that has car mileage readings. Where did you cap it? How did you do that?" I was like, "Oh, great." So she found it through data catalog, and then it was also "How did you cap it?" And I was like, "Oh, just check the code base." So everything comes together. In terms of something that's difficult, because things are often old at the MTA and it's very expertise driven, or you have to know the guy. A lot of databases have no documentation, or very little documentation. And it's how do you, if we want to be able to do something with this, what do you do? Oh, talk to Vinny, he's been doing this for a while. That's not a joke. Vinny's great, actually, yeah. But no, so a lot of trying to do that homework and lead on the subject matter expertise that is out there, but that also maybe isn't, and so they can help you interpret things, but also the person who works there now wasn't the person who was there when it was built 30 years ago. There's no documentation. So figuring out what it is you need and how to then, what are the right things to adjust the data lake to then clean up, transform and go to other people can be difficult. But in the end, if you do it well, it makes it useful for everyone. So.
I think my joke answer this question, the non-technical person who found herself in a technical role is anytime I have to rebase it branch, it's requires data count to rebase. But the real answer, I think, is that open data and transparency is something that I just fundamentally believe in, and I think probably everyone in this room believes, and that's why you're here today. And it is really challenging sometimes, or something I had to learn when I started to be in this role, is just how to manage that conflict when you are working with people who do not share that as a core value, and how you navigate that. And I think I am someone who's conflict averse. I am definitely a people pleaser, and it's really hard to just navigate that on a personal level of how to manage that conflict in a work environment. But I hope I have done better at that.
It's the culture change element. I think this Bendo was saying a bit of this, but Willis and our IT department, which has been very helpful. It's been an incomplete, kind of conversion to thinking of our team outside of IT as being one that's competent to work with data and manage it this way, and to develop tools. And then some difficult data owners or some people who still want to share who aren't on board with the larger vision. Kind of converting them one at a time, but it's always a challenge.
Great. I'm gonna kick this back to Lisa. I want you to sort of explain the life cycle of a data set and how it makes its way to the open data portal and how you know when it's ready for prime time.
Great question. So, when I took on this role, I inherited a bunch of data sets that were already on the portal, I think for about 40 something. And the life cycle when we first started this program was, okay, someone's gonna email me their CSV and we're gonna put it on the open data portal. And I inherited, 40 something data sets that I had to keep up that way, where I had a list of contacts.
You had 40 guys.
40 guys. 20 of them were named Vinny, and I had and it was my job now. Suddenly, every week or every month, I was manually uploading these CSVs to the New York State Open Data Portal. And I think at that point, the life cycle was really like, if someone had something that they had wanted to share at some point, it got put up on the portal, and then someone was now responsible for maintaining it. That person now me. We really evolved that life cycle to now, if you recall Yadi's flow charts earlier, where like everything is now documented in code if it's going to the open data portal, which does take more work up front, but then once it's up there, it is there, and it's like pretty hands-off for my team to maintain. So it does, when someone does request a new data set, there's a lot more work now going into building a sustainable process for that. And we only have so many members of the team. Not all of our projects are open data related, et cetera, et cetera. But we're hoping that when we put things out now, we're more intentional about it. There is the full pipeline behind it. We have QC'd the data internally. We know that the numbers are correct. It's hopefully a fairly clean data set to work with. All those are things that we check for before publishing.
We just emphasize what it was said. Like the idea that we went from the like 40 guys emailing a CSV and copying and pasting to like over 100 data sets where they go on from raw sources they process through and go out to the public without anybody ever looking at them or touching them is like an incredible change for us. And even with Matt was talking about congestion pricing, a new high visibility program went out the same way. Is like, you know, something I'm very proud of, that like this team is competent enough now, and the public sector team, 0 consultants, to like do this on our own is like a huge accomplishment for Lisa and the rest of the team.
And I think a related question that is a good follow-up is just how do you hope the public can benefit from, you know, more open and more transparent data from the MTA made available on open data? And can other public agencies benefit from an open data program? I imagine the answer is yes, but you all can elaborate.
No, just us. It's under the Lisa. I'll pass over to.
Yeah, I mean, I think like obviously the public benefits from open data for all the reasons that you are here today, but I really want to drive home the point that I do think the main benefit of an open data program is actually how it changes the internal culture of how a company works with data. I think having this legislative force behind forcing the MTA to be more transparent has definitely helped accelerate. I think that the overall work the DNA team does, because anytime someone doesn't want to share something, even if it's for an internal purpose, we can point to the open data law and say, well, we need to share it legally, so
We're gonna call the cops.
all the data cops. So while I love all of our open data users who use our data, and I'm so grateful for everyone who does, I do think that like one of the core underappreciated benefits of an open data program is the internal change that it brings.
I think just generally making government more efficient is important. And, you know, there's this whole layer of like transparency and accountability. And where I think, as Lisa mentioned, with our open data program, hopefully making our own an agency, like the departments within the FTA more accountable for their own work. But I think a lot of this like big culture change that our team is trying to make with making data, you know, more like creating this like culture of sharing your data, making more usable and reusable, I think is hopefully making teams more efficient. It is not easy or
I can promise you it does not save the guy on the right side of the board that, in the pre-DNA data pipeline era, it is not easy for that person to reproduce charts month after month, year after year, on their laptop, using an iPad notebook, rerunning charts with new numbers and new criteria, proven by new things each time. That is a waste of money and, government money. And hopefully what we're doing internally is changing that culture within teams. I think it is already changing, how quickly and efficiently teams work within the MTA. And I think that's important to keep doing.
One quick thing if I can add is I do think another aspect of open data that is so important is because my team exists, we get to do events like this that showcase the work that the data analytics team does overall. And I think that's so critical to the success of the team when you are working at a company or just living in this world where most people regularly don't care and don't know what a database is. They don't know what a pipeline is, right? But they do know what a positive view story in the press is that says, wow, the MTA has a great program. And so tying the work that the open data does to the broader data analytics team, I think is a unique way to showcase the value of data internally. And so for public agencies, I guess, who have their data team and they want to have that venue to showcase what it is they actually do, I think open data is a really cool tool to do that.
I'll just add one short thing. A lot of the open data sets we have now are basically outputs. It's like ridership and on-time performance, and it's like how well we're doing, how many people wrote. Things like ridership are largely not in our control. One thing that we started to do with the work that Lisa's team did on the budget open data set is we're starting to share more of our internal data. And so you're asking about how can open data be good for the MTA itself? I think the MTA has a lot of challenges that are not entirely of our own making. There's politics, there's legislation. Kind of looking at you, Rachel, and Dak, for help on this one. Collective bargaining agreements. There's some things that are kind of big hard rocks that we're not going to manage around necessarily on our own. And so we start to share more about our internals. It's not the most exciting, sexy stuff. It's not going to have a cool origin destination visual attached to it, but it will start to maybe change the public conversation around what kind of changes around the MTA would actually help us do better. So I'm hoping to see that cover our team next year. So.
All right, I want to inject a fun question here. I want to know how often you all look up when something went wrong with your commute. It is hopefully not often.
Actually, never. I'm experienced. So.
I don't look up when my own commute goes wrong, but my husband does text me every single time his train is late, and we have it. There's an internal venue where you can see about 60 seconds before it goes out to the public MTA app what's going wrong, and he will regularly text me for updates.
All the time. And also, my friends now know they do this, and so they ask me. So if anybody was, for example, at Atlantic on Thursday at 5:45 p.m., the B and the Q were just screwed up all evening. I kind of was like, what happened? So there was some debris and there was track fire and work the tracks. Anyway, I look up the stuff every day, or actually the next day.
Yeah, my answer is the same as Lisa. I don't, but my husband will message me every time. He just wants to know immediately how he needs to redirect his commute.
Working with kind of a bad partner to my girlfriend. She messages me all the time about it sucks. What I specifically do is, this is kind of fun. If you're ever at a bus stop, you can text that little number and it'll tell you when the bus is coming. But then afterwards, you press O, it will text you the occupancy, which is based on our automatic passenger counters. And so what I often do, because I work a lot with the automatic passenger counter data, is I'll press O and then I'll later go and see how correct it was, either by being on the bus itself or just by looking at the data. And it's surprising how accurate that data actually is. Oftentimes it will be off and maybe one if there's the stroller that it follows a person.
I like to use our O teams data when things happen, and we focus on next day data. And it's rare that 24 hours later I still care about whatever happened. I pick up what the issue is. Just so you know, the BQ thing at Atlantic Avenue, I just happened to be talking to a guy who knows everything about the subway. it was a very rare, like hasn't happened in 20 years, subway problem called a runaway motor. Sounds as bad as it is. The brakes were engaged if they didn't happen, but like the motor wouldn't turn off even though the operator was not like applying power to the train. And so like the wheels were spinning, but the train wasn't moving, where it's just like warping the track. So it's really bad. You got to cut the power, like tow the train out of there. There's a major problem. Just in case you're wondering what happened, CQ, no worries about it.
All right, in our remaining 5 minutes, I'm going to end with a question that everyone can answer. Do you have advice for folks who are looking to start working in the public sector, specifically in data or something data adjacent?
You have a really good internship program. Some of our interns in the room. Oh, sorry. We're also named Evan. Chris, who worked on our congestion pricing. And Vivian's here. Anyway, so our interns do really interesting things. They get involved in big projects. And maybe Evan, this Evan as well.
I think if you're a student and want to, or thinking about working in public sector, that you should think harder and you should do it. I went to grad school 2 years ago, not long ago, also kind of was in the same boat, trying to decide what my interest would be. I can be happier about making the decision to work in public sector, in data. This work is really important. I had a concern that it would be really archaic, like that the data work in government, in the public sector would not be interesting, but just really archaic. Excel spreadsheets, for example. It is not like that. There are teams that work like that, but there are also teams that don't work like that. And so if that is a role of interest to you, definitely pursue it and reach out to our team if you want to talk more.
I need certain terms of very backward advice for applying to a team like ours or another data science team in the government. I think that a lot of people have the technical skills already in terms of Python, R, comfortability with working with the data itself. I think what we often end up really making our hiring decision on is people who know how to use that to tell stories. People who are really good about communicating the work that they've done at past companies or past agencies, people who can put a really good visualization together. I think that oftentimes when teams like ours, teams across government make decisions, it's often about that skills. Oftentimes when teams like ours, teams across government make decisions, it's often about that skills.
I guess I'll add, I don't have the background in transportation. Luckily, I trick people to hire me. But if it's something you want to, don't let us say no, right? Don't tell yourself no. Just apply.
So that internship thing, if you're in a full-time job, my email address is firstname.lastname@nyct.com. Or if you want to, if you'd like to do some of the things like what we've done at your own agency, you can get in touch with us for that reason. Really do reach out.
All right, I think we are at time. Thank you so much to the panelists. If you want a sticker or a glasses cleaner, we have those. They keep floating around, but we will make sure that you get one and make room for coming.